That's a pretty radical, concept in some ways. That you
Yeah.
think that everything that is happening in my life right now is as it should be.
Love has a tremendous power to push us beyond or carry us beyond our preconceived ideas and limitations.
In my meditation practice, I would focus on the spiritual heart in the center of the chest, which is the place in us that has the most purity and is also closely connected to the soul.
If you can go beyond everything that limits you and really connect with the vaster and deeper consciousness that pervades this universe, when you come back to explain the experience, the only words you'll find to describe it.
There's an intuitive knowledge about the divine, because I think we all have, an eternal relationship with the divine, and it's already there from the moment you're born, and of course way before that. Before the soul takes incarnation, it's accrued some karma from previous incarnations. It looks upon its next life, and then with those circumstances, it chooses parents, it chooses a country.
Yeah, I think it's choosing an opportunity for you to learn a particular lesson.
Why are we called the Acceptance of Life podcast?
Yeah, well, thank you. And for me, the acceptance of life is one of the key ideas that I've based my life around. And the idea originally actually came to me through my meditation teacher, Sri Chinmoy.
Who's also my meditation teacher.
Yeah, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
And so I've always been interested in what is the ideal way to approach life. And if we take life as a game or a play, what is the best possible way to align yourself with that game to get the best possible outcomes or the best possible results? And so I was really interested when I became acquainted with Sri Chinmoy's work, which is incredibly vast and prolific. But at some point in the 1980s, he was actually asked by a reporter to summarize what his philosophy was in one sentence. And so for me, this immediately, a light bulb moment happened for me. Something went off in my head, and I thought to myself, that's actually a very significant thing for a spiritual master who's playing the game at such a high level and has such a control or understanding of all the different levels of reality, and is able to see and experience things that are far beyond what I can see and experience at this time. How would he capture all of that depth and complexity and put that into one sentence?
Yeah, that's a challenge. You weren't around in the 80s yet when he was asked that question, right?
No, so I just came across it, and many of Sri Chinmoy's students know his answer.
Yeah.
And so his answer was famously, it's almost like in two parts. The first part, which for me is incredibly profound, is our philosophy is the acceptance of life for the transformation of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really interesting. And for a lot of people who practice spirituality and are trying to live in the world, you perhaps wouldn't think of the first quality that a master would talk about when he talks about dealing with the world would be acceptance. You might think of peace or love. You might think of harmony or gratitude. You might think of many of the myriad other spiritual qualities. But Sri Chinmoy very particularly chose that word acceptance. And it was the acceptance of life, not just as the acceptance of an idle man or someone who was just going to go along with whatever was happening, but instead it was the acceptance of life to therefore then transform life.
Yeah.
And so that for me became a moment where I was like, wow, okay, there's something to this quality of acceptance that I need to explore further.
Yeah, because acceptance seems, like you said, it seems a word that can be interpreted in a very passive way. You accept something, you kind of surrender to life circumstances. There's nothing we can do. We just have to accept the reality. It kind of can get a very negative connotation, but that's not, I think, how Sri Chinmoy used that word. It was a very positive approach, the acceptance, and then it's also for the transformation of life. And so how does that second part, transformation, come from that first part, acceptance?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of reasons that over time I've started to see more and more of the depth of that saying. And so the acceptance of life, Sri Chinmoy liked the analogy of the potter, and the potter or someone making ceramics or working with clay. If you're not willing to touch the clay and become involved with the difficulties and the troubles of life, if you can't accept the world as it is, you're never going to be able to transform it. If the potter doesn't want to touch the clay because he feels it's dirty and full of impurities, he'll never be able to create something beautiful.
And the clay is kind of the world in this analogy. It's like the world around us with all its, it's different shades and colors and good side, bad side, negative, positive.
And many spiritual traditions in the past have seen the world as being so full of problems and so unredeemable in some way that they didn't want to touch it. And so they were retiring to the Himalayan caves or cloistering themselves in a monastery.
Yeah.
But Sri Chinmoy was very much a man of action and very much a man of this time and this place in the world. So he really wanted to I think, give that message that the most powerful position to take in the world at this point is accepting the world as it is, and then from that point trying to see what you personally can do to try and make the reality better in some way. And so then it becomes a very proactive and a positive statement.
So but when you say making the world better, are you talking about taking action, or is it just your way of seeing the world, your perspective on it?
So that's a really interesting question. And so first of all, when I started thinking about this idea, my first concept of it was we accept the world and then we try and transform the world.
Yeah.
So it was like a two-step process.
Yeah.
We say, okay, this is how things are, and then this is how I would like to be.
Yeah. So we'll take the world as it is with all its imperfections, and then we will try to make it better somehow. We will do some positive initiatives.
Exactly.
We'll pray, meditate. We will do,
And so that's an incredibly powerful starting point for everyone. If your life is not how you would like it to be, it's your responsibility in some way to take some steps to transform it and to start moving towards a reality that's more meaningful to you. But if you just want to criticize and disparage the world but you don't put any effort into changing it in any way, you're simply a victim. And you see that a lot in the world around us, where this story of victimhood keeps people passive and keeps people trapped. We all know people who talk about, if only this had happened, if I'd had a better education, or if my parents had treated me better, or if I'd had better opportunities, then I would have done something.
But there is something to say. Some people do have less opportunities starting out from life than others, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the world is never going to be an even playing field, and that's something we simply have to accept as part of the function, or it's the type of universe and the type of world we're living in.
Yeah.
Everyone is not given the same opportunities, because we've all got different scripts. We're all here to act out a different soul's purpose, we could say. So of course then everyone is going to be put in a unique situation that's attuned for them. But the idea of always looking at the things, the lack of in your life, the things that didn't go well, the opportunities that you didn't receive, that doesn't strengthen you. It actually weakens you.
Yeah.
And so if you find yourself thinking like that, or find yourself talking like that, or people who are existing in the world like that, there is some real power to change your mindset in that situation, and to think that all of these situations that we found ourselves in, they are the best possible ones we have available to us for us to move forward in the world.
That's a pretty radical, concept in some ways, that you think that everything that is happening in my life right now is as it should be. Yeah, that's basically what you're saying.
Exactly. But what I think how you should consider the idea of acceptance is that at every moment you've got two choices for every situation you find yourself in. You can either accept the world as it is in this very moment, or you can resist it. And the problem with trying to resist reality is reality has an unbelievable force behind it. Just because you don't want the world to be like this and you wish it was some other way doesn't mean reality is going to change for you. So if you're always in that position of resisting reality as it is, all you're going to do is create suffering for yourself, because you're creating friction between yourself and reality. And you may wish things to be some other way, but holding on to that and resisting the way things are, it first of all stops you being proactive and moving forward. But then secondly, it causes suffering for you. So I don't think that's ever the most powerful position to put yourself in. And it is such a fundamental decision to make at every moment. And so I think that's so wonderful how Sri Chinmoy, when he encapsulated his philosophy in one sense, he started with that. It's like, okay, where do we start from? Like, what is the ideal approach to your life? And it seems to me that what he's saying is play the game of acceptance. Accept life as it is, and then
accept the cards that you're dealt.
Exactly.
So you're dealt a hand at the beginning of your life, and you may not like it.
Yeah.
You may see that others have better cards than you. Yeah. And you can say, well, that's really unfair. Why am I in such a bad place? You look at this person, that country is much better circumstances, but you have to, and I agree with that. You have to accept the cards that you're dealt,
Yeah,
and you have to play the game as well as you can do with those cards,
exactly.
and then you might end up with better cards
And
eventually.
the thing as well is you have to be humble enough to recognize the limitations of your own knowledge. And for you to think that you somehow know what situation would be better for you than the situation you have right now is, for me, a huge, huge leap, which I don't think you have any backing for that, taking that step. If you somehow think you would be better off if you had X, Y, or Z, it's not as clear cut as you think that is.
Yeah.
And very often, if you were in a different situation, you'd find yourself with different set of problems, which perhaps would be equally bad, if not worse, than the current situation.
Well, you can also talk about the reasons why we are dealt certain cards, right? Then we look at the concept of karma, for instance. Like the idea that you have lived several lifetimes already and you've accrued karma. You've done actions in that life, good and bad. And the karma that comes back from you is determining the circumstances for your next life. So before the soul takes incarnation, it looks at, it's accrued some karma from previous incarnations. It looks upon its next life, and then with those circumstances, it chooses, probably it chooses parents, it chooses a country.
I think it's choosing an opportunity for you to learn a particular lesson. That to me seems a good synopsis of often what it's like when a soul comes here to have experiences. That your situation that you found yourself in is the right situation for you to learn a particular lesson. And it may be not the lesson that you, with your mind or your ego, think that you want to learn.
Well, that's the thing, right?
But there's always a deeper reality.
The challenge is to, like you said, the challenge is to accept the hand that you're dealt with, and from there, I think you start to make progress and I think that the great thing is about learning those lessons. There's great joy and great, there's real joy and meaning to a life that you accept your life and you make the best of it, and you go step by step and you do the best you can and you make spiritual progress. And the joy that comes from actual progress you make in your life is so tangible and so much more valuable to me than any material circumstances. So I think if you get if you focus more on the inner wealth, what's inside us, and bring that to the fore, then that's so much more valuable than looking at material circumstances.
Because it's never going to be your outer circumstances that are going to determine the quality of your life. It's always going to be how you inwardly are dealing with the situations you find yourself in.
So then that's the first step, right? Acceptance of life. But then there comes the second step, the transformation of life.
And so I always thought, like I said earlier, that you would do one and then you would do the other. And I think if we look at it on sort of the lowest level possible, that's how reality works. You accept something and then you go about and trying to change it. So, but I had an experience many years ago when I was traveling through India, and I was traveling through northern India on the trains, and I had a plan of where I was supposed to be and what I thought I was supposed to be doing at that moment. And the train ended up running later and later and later. And when I got on board the train, it was running 3 hours late. And by the time we arrived at the station that I was heading to, I was like 10, 11, 12 hours late. And so it totally threw all of my plans into disarray. And so I had to ring up and change bookings. And I had to deal with the situation. But when I was on the train, at some point I had this moment where I realized that the train was running wildly behind schedule. And so I got up from my cabin where I was seated with some other lovely Indian people, and I went out, and in that moment I could feel there was still this battle in myself between accepting the situation and resisting it, and fighting against it.
I mean, resisting it means feeling stressed.
Exactly.
Like, why this is happening?
Exactly. So there was some resistance against what was going on at that moment. And so I went to the door of the train. One wonderful thing about Indian trains, you can just open the door while it's going. And so I was hanging out the door of the train, and we're going through Bihar province in the north of India, and it was post-monsoon. And it was so lush and green, and the smell in the air was just tangible, like this lush green smell. And the sun was going down. And I realized in that moment that I was exactly where I needed to be. And so there was this almost like an opening of my heart to the potential of that moment. And so I went back and sat in my carriage, and I started really engaging with the Indian gentleman on the train with me in my carriage. And we ended up having such a lovely time. And looking back on it, I realized in that moment of true acceptance, there was the understanding of this was what was going on. But when I really opened my heart and truly accepted the moment as it was, in that moment, it was transformed. It wasn't that I needed to do something to transform it.
Yeah.
Simply the true, full, complete acceptance of the moment.
Yeah.
In that moment, everything was different. Suddenly, I saw everyone around me in a different light. And I saw that these were all amazing souls with their own stories and their own journey. And I had such a wonderful rest of the journey. And I spent just hours talking with these gentlemen, and we exchanged numbers, and they would message me for weeks and months afterwards. And the experience was such a beautiful experience, but I could easily have missed out on it if I had remained in my own reality of expecting or wanting things to be different.
So it's a shift of perspective that happened.
Exactly.
And did it change the end? Like, did you still have to make tourist bookings?
In the end, everything fell into place perfectly as it was. And so there was no need to create stress and resistance. But it was at that moment I realized, wow, like there's something powerful about when we truly accept something with our heart, then everything is different.
Yeah, I have a story like that too. There was so we organize races for the public. So with our marathon team, spiritual organization, the Street Chinmoy Marathon Team, we organize a few races in Amsterdam where I live. And so I was organizing this one, I think it was a 50K and 100K race that we do every year in May. And, for the race, you have to set up, you have to organize a lot of things just in the morning. There's tents. And so we had a deal with a local cricket club that would store our materials.
Yeah.
And in the morning, I was going to the cricket club, and I realized the door was locked. So they always leave the door unlocked.
Oh, no.
And so I was like, oh, my God, he left the door locked. What do? I can't get to the materials. You can't have a race. And then what happened was I was biking frantically back to the race start when I got a flat tire in my bike. I was like, oh, my God, my bike is a flat tire. What do I do? So I was back at the race, and I borrowed somebody else's bike, and I thought, okay, I have to. No, then when I was biking somewhere else to arrange something, I realized there was a guy that was setting up his own stuff on our race course. So there was kind of a food festival happening that same day, and there was no communication. He was like setting up on the race course. Like, no, I have a permit and everything. And I'm like, yeah, but we have runners coming in here soon. And he says, oh, you have to call this lady. So then I was, frantically biking to this place where they had the phone number of the lady, and there were like 3 or 4 things, and they were all going totally wrong. Yeah. And then I was on my bike, and that's when the bike broke down, actually. Yeah. That moment when I had like full stress.
Just when you needed it.
Just when I needed it, boom, the bike broke down. And I was in the middle of the forest, and I was like, exactly that moment, I was at a crossroads. And then I decided, you know what? I'm just going to accept this. I'm just going to be grateful for it. So I was consciously saying, universe, God, thank you for this experience. This is just what I need. And I was genuinely trying to be grateful for it.
Yeah.
And then I felt this kind of calm in myself, like this kind of peace descended. And suddenly, boom, 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 everything was fixed. So I got the phone number of the lady. I phoned the lady from the forest. She said, oh, no problem. Just ask the guy to move there. Yeah. It's all arranged. Then I went back to the camp, and this other friend of mine fixed my bike.
Yeah.
Then I got a hold of the guy from the cricket club. He came out, and he told us a way how to get to the materials. And literally within 10 minutes, all the problems were gone.
Yeah.
And it was that moment of not choosing to resist, not choosing to fret and to worry, and just to accept it, that really changed everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great. There's the great quote that how much stress and worry is caused by things that have never happened.
Yeah,
and all of us have that predisposition in our own minds to catastrophize and worry and stress about things. And it's the acceptance of life, I think, is such a powerful tool to get you out of those situations and bring you into the here and now.
Yeah.
And one other thing I would say about it, because I know this is an issue for a lot of people, is that for all of us, we have certain things about our physical being or our life or our circumstances that we in some way would like to be different. We'd like to be taller, we'd like to be shorter, we'd like to be thinner, or we'd like to
more hair
or less hair or whatever it is. And so everyone has these parts of themselves that they think are somehow imperfect. And for a lot of us, that causes so much suffering in our lives. But there is something so powerful about choosing to say, yeah, this is the vessel I have, and I love it for what it is, and taking that as part of your journey, taking that as because this is the only vessel that you have here on earth. You can't somehow change into a different one at some point.
You can do plastic surgery.
And so and you see that people, spend an inordinate amount of time and energy and money trying to change these things, when in fact there's something really powerful and transformative about choosing to say, I accept all of this, and even go beyond that and to say, I love this. I love my body. I love my life. I love the circumstances. Because when you start approaching the world from a place of love is the type of power that is so deep and transformative that it gets in places where other forces can't.
I'm reminded of the story you told me once about this. I think it was a triathlete who was always getting second place.
Yes, yeah.
What was that story? It was
Australian triathlete called Pete Jacobs, I think his name was. And so I saw he won the Hawaii Ironman probably 10 or 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I just was so struck by the interview he gave at the finish line, because Ironman is really considered one of the toughest one-day sporting events in the world, and they're called Ironman.
Yeah.
And, they're tough. They're made of nails and iron and lead, and they're out there just suffering through this. And so the interviews you normally get at the finish line in an event like that are often in that sort of vein.
Yeah.
And I saw Pete Jacobs win, and then he comes across the line, and the interviewer's starting to ask him some questions. And, Pete, how did you find it out? And he said, I was just loving it. I was just absolutely loving the experience out there. And I thought to myself, this is not the normal conversation that you hear at the finish line.
Yeah.
And so the interviewer was confused. He said, what do you mean? He said, I got on the swim, and I told myself, and I reminded myself, oh my God, I love swimming. And here I am in this beautiful bay in Hawaii, and there's all these people around cheering for us. He said, I'm going to love this swim. And he got through the swim, and the whole way he was reminding himself, wow, I really love this. And so he was completely present from a place of love, which is a tremendously transformative power. And he comes out and he comes onto the bike. And what he did then was really interesting, I think, as well, because he started out on the bike lead, and he moved into the lead at some point on the bike, I think. And he started saying to himself, he started reminding himself, wow, my parents, they're going to be watching me on television, and they're going to be absolutely loving the fact that I'm having such a good day, that I'm out here leading the bike. They're absolutely going to be loving that. And so he started expanding that love from himself, connecting to others, so enlarging himself from the individual to something greater than that.
Yeah.
And that was his whole process throughout the day, just keeping on staying in a place of love and reminding himself that he had chosen to do this event, and he was choosing to do it from a place of love. And it turned out, I read a follow-up interview, and he was talking about how before the race, he was visiting his kinesiologist. And a kinesiologist is someone who does muscle testing. And the kinesiologist wanted to see how his mental state was around different situations in the race. So his kinesiologist was asking him to imagine different scenarios. So imagine yourself coming out, and you've got Craig Alexander and Chris McCormick just behind you.
Great triathletes in the room, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so when he was imagining sort of, his arch rivals really close behind him, it was making him feeling stressed, anxious, tense, tight, fearful, and he immediately would go weak. So the kinesiologist was pushing on his arm, and when he imagined that, he would immediately go weak.
Yeah.
So the kinesiologist flipped it around and said, okay, imagine yourself in this situation, but imagine how much you'd love to be in that situation. Like, be there and be loving that situation. And as soon as he was doing it from a place of love, suddenly he was rock solid.
Yeah.
And so he realized, wow, this is my superpower. If I can remember this place and power of love, then I can run through brick walls.
So then his muscle tone was very strong.
The and I remember the famous marathon runner Paula Radcliffe. She did the same thing in her marathon. She would often repeat to herself, "I love Isla," which was her firstborn daughter. And so love has a tremendous power to push us beyond or carry us beyond our preconceived ideas and limitations.
Well, I think love is acceptance. So if we talk about acceptance, it's almost a synonym for love.
Whoa! That is a powerful statement. I love it.
Love is everywhere. It's pervading the universe.
Yeah.
And I think if you love something, there is automatically acceptance there.
Yeah.
Like if you love your life, if you love reality,
exactly,
then you accept it and you can work with it.
Yeah.
And it can work with you.
Yeah, because I mean, nearly all spiritual traditions or even religious traditions come to the point at some point during their teachings of basically trying to point out that the foundational state of the universe, if you can go beyond mind, if you can go beyond thoughts, if you can go beyond everything that limits you and really connect with the vaster and deeper consciousness that pervades this universe, when you come back to explain the experience, the only words you'll find to describe it is just pure unconditional love.
Yeah.
And for any of you who have practiced meditation or have had a glimpse or touched on that experience,
Or like a near-death experience.
yeah, you'll feel just this unbelievable sense of overwhelming love. And so I think there is a powerful connection between the two of those.
Wonderful. I think, we haven't really introduced ourselves properly. We just dove right in, which was really interesting. I think it's a good idea. Maybe we introduce each other for our listeners of this podcast.
Would you like to begin?
I would like to begin. So sitting here on my left side is Vajin Armstrong. And Vajin is a very, very good friend of mine already for, let's see, how long do we know each other? 20 years. More than 20 years.
Yeah, maybe nearly 25 years.
Yeah. So we met each other both on our spiritual path. We have the same spiritual teacher, and we connected through running in the beginning. We were both marathon runners. We're both pretty good marathon runners. And Vajin became a very, very excellent ultra runner. So you started doing ultra runs, and you regularly place in the top 3 or in the top 5 or in the top 10 of these big international races. You are also an amazing person when it comes to wisdom and love and friendship. And so I treasure our friendship very, very much. I've always looked forward to the times when you're traveling, and you're traveling a lot. So Vajin is traveling, I guess, 3 to 6 months out of the year. You're away from your home in New Zealand. You're based in Christchurch, New Zealand, and you love to travel. So you visit me every year in my hometown in Amsterdam. And I visited you. Now it's 5 years ago. I went to Christchurch, and in Christchurch you run a beautiful shop. You have it's called Gandharva Loka, and it's a music shop that sells instruments from around the world. These really amazing different instruments, and it's like a toy store for musicians. So you can find any kind of
a good description.
Yeah, beautiful instruments, and also you have these wonderful interactions with people. And we always we call each other maybe once every 1 or 2 weeks, and we always have these amazing conversations on the phone. And from that kind of came the idea, we should make a podcast. We should talk about this, and because I love the conversations with you. They always go into depth. They always have meaning, and I've also invited you a few times to speak to do classes, meditation classes in my hometown, and it was always an amazing experience for me and for the listeners. So anyway, I'm happy to have you, Vajin, in the Acceptance of Life podcast. So hoping for many, many beautiful episodes and adventures ahead.
Wonderful. And so here we have Abhinabha Tangerman. He is one of the finest children of Amsterdam and Holland. And he is a true Renaissance man. And for any of you who know Abhinabha, you'll know his incredible wide-ranging set of skills, from a speaker to a singer to an actor to a businessman now to an athlete. Abhinabha has really shown a wonderful range of skills across so many domains. And what I always, one of the things I'm most inspired about my friend Abhinabha here is I often call him the Lord of Time, because the amount he manages to fit into a day, a week, an hour, a month is always incredibly inspiring to me. And so Abhinabha is very well known in our spiritual community for his dramatic skills. He's one of great actors who's often performing. He's a great singer and is in many music groups. He's got his own music group as well. And you probably heard a lovely snippet of his group in the intro to today's show.
Wonderful. I am touched. I'm got to stop you there. And anyway, this is a nice segue into where we are at the moment, because we are in Turkey.
We are.
We are enjoying a spiritual retreat here.
Yeah.
That's lasting 10 days.
Yeah.
And we are coming together with people from our spiritual community from all over the world.
Yeah.
We are in a beautiful hotel, and we are basically practicing plunging into our spiritual life for 10 days. We're having meditations here, but it's much more than just a silent retreat.
Yeah.
We are doing all kinds of other things. We do plays together. We do sports. So this morning we ran a 1 mile race, many of us. And so what I liked a lot about this spiritual path, why I joined also in the first place, is its versatility. So there's a lot of different elements. It's not just meditation. It's not just very dry, spiritual
Come on,
practice.
think about the poor renunciants.
Yeah.
Like, how are they going to deal with this?
It's not my cup of tea, really. Yeah, I couldn't do a silent retreat, I think. So I love the versatility. So we do sports. We have light entertainment. We do plays. What else do we do? We singing. We do a lot of music.
Yeah, and I think that is something that really struck me about the Sri Chinmoy Center when I first came across it, is that my idea of spirituality was, when I became interested in it, which was in my teenage years, I was much more interested in renouncing the world. I thought that was the pathway to success in the spiritual life. And so I was thinking that if I really wanted to practice seriously, I needed to go to a monastery. And so I was very interested in the practice of Buddhism. And that was something that really gripped me, first of all. And it really wasn't until I came in contact with Sri Chinmoy. And as soon as I saw some pictures of him and some footage of him meditating, I suddenly realized, okay, this is a man who has really reached the highest heights of meditation. And so he's achieved what I'm hoping to achieve, that I'm dreaming and working towards achieving. But yet he was still so dynamically involved in the world around him, and with his students, and with the larger world, the community that he was part of. And I found that tremendously interesting, because I had always thought that all of these other outer activities had no real inherent value, and the only thing that had true value was the highest or the deepest spiritual pursuits. But yet I saw from his life, he loved sports, he loved music, he loved creativity, he loved writing and poetry, and all of these different things. And one of the things which was most amusing or shocking to me, depending on the moment, was when I saw him enjoying clown shows from his students, or plays, and people doing these amateur theatrical productions.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, what is this? It was so not what I imagined a spiritual tradition to look like.
Yeah.
But the thing that I realized as well, that we're not living in the same time as we were at any other point in history. So in other times in history, there needed to be a separation of the spiritual life from the material world. Because if you were around in the Middle Ages, or any times before now, the world was constantly full of trouble and sorrows and disease and death and all of these things, and things that made your life very difficult to practice spirituality. So I can see fully why people, to really focus on the inner quest, would in the past leave the society and try and step outside of that. Because if you were constantly at risk of being attacked by bandits, or the king conscripting you for his army, that's not a very tenable position to be really trying to approach the spiritual life from. But although the world today has its own problems, it doesn't have some of the problems that we've had in the past of, invading, marauding armies, marching across Europe.
No, we live in a much more peaceful world, despite of what, the picture that is painted around us. This is actually the most peaceful time ever, with the least amount of wars.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was the time, and you really saw it. Sri Chinmoy's meditation guru or teacher was Sri Aurobindo. And for me, he was really the first one who started to bring this idea in of integral yoga, of trying to integrate the different parts of our being, but trying to also create a really full and robust spiritual life that included not only the spiritual disciplines, but trying to have a livelihood as well, trying to run a business of some description, and trying to interact through poetry and music and singing and all of these different artistic pursuits, which really can be of the highest value as well. Like if you can really sing in a deeply and profoundly spiritual way, really sing from your heart, you can have the same types of experiences you can have in your meditation.
Yeah, well, I do have that experience many times. So I am practicing singing a lot. Sri Chinmoy has composed thousands of songs, and as part of my sadhana, part of my meditation practice, I practice a lot of his songs.
Yeah.
And I do feel that many times when I don't have, let's say, a good meditation, just a silent meditation, when I start singing, it just transports me into this higher state of consciousness.
Yeah.
So it's just all these different avenues that we have to approach the higher consciousness. It's not
Yeah.
only through meditation, because meditation is actually quite hard.
Yeah,
It's really hard to still the mind and to have these profound, really inner depths. It happens once in a while, and you have these really beautiful high meditations.
Yeah.
Or you can have a period where you have great meditations for a number of days or weeks or maybe even months. But it is hard. It is hard. The mind, the thoughts creep in, and
And for those who are listening who are not regular meditators, like how would you encapsulate the idea of what the practice of meditation is or aiming towards?
Yeah, I think it's very simple. It's stilling the mind. That is
Mm-hmm.
step number one. And if the mind is stilled, is silenced, then the heart can open. So, in my meditation practice, I would focus on the spiritual heart in the center of the chest, which is the place in us that has the most purity and is also closely connected to the soul. And so when we meditate on the heart, we can bring the qualities of peace, of joy, the inner qualities to the fore. But the mind needs to be stilled, because when the mind is active, there's no, we cannot plunge into our inner depths.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying that we're bringing our awareness down and identifying ourselves with our heart. So instead of most of us, when we're operating in the day-to-day life, we are using the tool that we have to use in the world, which is our mind.
Yeah.
But very often I think we mistake that tool for our truest nature, which it's obviously not.
Yeah.
I think most people feel and understand that their mind and their thoughts is not the deepest part of them.
No, because the mind and the thoughts, they change all the time, right? It's like the weather. It's like today is a beautiful weather, and then it can be rainy and cloudy, and your mind is the same. Your mind, you can have positive thoughts, negative thoughts, silly thoughts all the time going through your mind, but they're just all distractions ultimately from the deeper reality. And that's so anyway, the idea of having so many different avenues to approach the higher consciousness, or to approach this idea of going towards your deeper self, discovering your true self. I like that very much. So even when I'm doing plays, which sounds really silly, if I do plays with other people, it gives me joy. And joy is another avenue how to approach the reality.
And I think it also, one thing that it really does is it gives all of the other people in the room a lot of joy as well. And I think that's one of the secrets that Sri Chinmoy was looking to unlock, is that if you can be happy and joyful and with your spiritual brothers in this environment, you're always going to move forward. You're always going to make progress. You're always going to dive a little bit deeper in. Whereas if you're sitting there and you're racked by your own guilt and your own worry and stresses and all of these things, it's very hard for you to make progress when you're holding on to all of those things.
So is that, according to you, is that the reason why Sri Chinmoy made all these different things, like plays, like you said in the beginning, it confused you, right? This idea that he had all these, he had a clown acts and all these kind of silly things around.
Yeah, I my mind perhaps didn't understand what was going on, but my heart did understand. Because when I've been in the room and we have functions, and we'll start with a period of meditation, and that will be beautiful and deep and soulful, but very often the consciousness will actually go higher at other points in the evening. And I always remember some of our big performances that have happened on our Christmas trips, and when you have a big ensemble cast and great costumes, and it really lifts up the energy of the whole room, and the whole consciousness of the space and everyone in it, I think, is really elevated from seeing their spiritual community, their brothers and sisters, really acting out something and offering something in a really full and uninhibited way. And it really takes people on a journey. And it takes them outside of themselves. We feel like we're part of something bigger. And the great thing is, with a spiritual master, he's seeing so many different levels at the same time, from the physical and the energetic level, and then right up to the highest metaphysical levels. He's seeing all of these realities at the same time. And so you can never be exactly sure what is if there's one or if there's multiple reasons for his actions. It's almost the master's actions in some ways are a little bit inscrutable. But if you have faith that they're leading us towards a better future and a better reality. And the best way to be aware of that is just to simply be there and be present and feel how the consciousness changes. And I've definitely seen that and experienced that from some of the performances you've been part of.
Well, I think the best way to test any theory is to look at the results over the long period. So for me also, when I look at my spiritual life, I feel that I'm so much happier than I was, before I started a spiritual life. Like this idea of happiness, of joyfulness, cheerfulness, is a really good sign of progress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about the spiritual life, I think that's an important concept that we perhaps touch on today as well.
Yeah.
Because the spiritual life is somewhat different from the religious life, we could say. And for most people, religion and spirituality, it's not exactly clear for them what the differentiation between the two concepts are.
Would you like to dive in?
Well, I've got a few ideas. And so for me, the religious life tells us how we should act in the world. So it tells us what sort of sacrifices we should make, or what sort of rituals we should practice, and what sort of the way we should treat and operate in the world, and how we should treat other people. So it's giving us a guide, a set of guidance for living in the world. And spirituality, on the other hand, is really that next step, and I think it's dealing with your own personal relationship with the divine. And I think Sri Chinmoy talked about that once. He mentioned that spirituality, really, let's say the goal or the aim of spirituality is to constant oneness with the divine, with the sacred, with the highest part of reality. And that's an incredibly profound and lofty goal, to constantly be in tune with the highest part of the universe, the divine.
Which is inside of ourselves, right?
Exactly, because we are nothing if not that.
Yeah.
And so that's the great thing about the spiritual life, is although over time you change, you don't change into something else or someone else. You become more truly who you are. And that's always very soothing for me, because some people are worried or scared that if they start on a spiritual path, maybe they're going to change, and maybe they won't.
They're going to lose something precious.
They're going to become something different or someone else.
Yeah.
I would always say, no, all you will do is become more truly who you are meant to be. And sometimes there's a great saying in China, and it's, every day a man of knowledge learns something new. Every day a man of Tao or wisdom unlearns something.
Oh, beautiful.
And so that's very often the game we're playing, that we're something far more than we are in our everyday life. And sometimes there's much unlearning that we need to do.
The unlearning is more difficult than the learning, almost.
Exactly.
Like, we've acquired all these, these patterns
habits,
of behavior,
patterns, programming, you could
thought
say.
patterns, thought programs. Yeah, to unlearn those is part of the journey.
So
it's basically uncovering
exactly.
to discover. So we have to uncover the layers of what we call ignorance, or doubt, and all these layers of patterns, negative patterns that are not helping us.
Yeah.
And I always find that the more true you become, also it has a childlike quality, because as a child, you are really what you are, right?
Yeah.
You one of the endearing qualities of children is spontaneity.
Yeah, you're not wearing a mask all the time.
There's no mask. Exactly. They just are themselves, and they just approach any stranger like it's their best friend.
Yeah.
So they really live from the heart, which is the quality of the heart, is to unite, to feel this sense of oneness with the world. And that's also what I discovered and felt when I was progressing on the spiritual path, is that you become childlike, not childish. There's a difference between those two.
That is an important. You're not having tantrums at the supermarket if you're not getting what you
want.
Yeah,
exactly. It's not that kind of childishness, but it's the childlikeness is more in the wonderment that you can look at life every day with fresh eyes and see the miracles that unfold before you every day. And they can be little things: a sunrise, beautiful nature, a tree, the song of a bird, just these small moments of gratitude, and just this wonderful miracle of life.
Yeah, you see the joy that a child gets playing in a sprinkler on a summer's day,
exactly,
and running through it and seeing the sun refracting through all of the droplets of water. And there's something incredibly magical about that for a child. Whereas for most adults, they'll just be too busy, focused on their next goal and their next meeting or their next responsibility.
So it's very interesting that life kind of gives us this gift at the beginning of our life, where it's like, this is who you are. This is kind of like a really good version of you. It's you as a child, you as a spontaneous, and then the adult starts to form. We start to form all these other patterns. Our thinking mind comes to the fore, and we kind of lose that spark, right? We lose that magical childlike spark. There are many stories about that, like the loss of childhood, the loss of innocence.
Yeah.
But I think the good news is that you can regain it.
Yeah.
And it's even more valuable when you regain it.
Yeah, and perhaps you need to go on that great journey from having it losing it, and then going on this great journey to come back to that space, but to see it truly for the first time. There's that idea that you need to go through that process so you can return to that state, but actually appreciate it properly. Because when you find yourself with something, with anything, when you have not experienced the lack of that thing, you perhaps don't properly appreciate it.
Well, it's like isn't that the ideology of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Paradise? Like there's they didn't know anything else but paradise.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe it's not properly valued in that sense.
Yeah.
And you kind of almost have to fall to rediscover paradise and to properly value it.
Yeah. So if we just go back a little bit, we were talking about the difference between religion and spirituality.
Exactly.
And I'd just like to touch on that a little bit more, just to clarify it for people so they can understand, because Sri-Chin, we had a wonderful way of talking about that, the difference between religion and spirituality. And I think it's nice to use that example. And so he would talk about, so I said religion is teaching us how we should operate in the world, the rituals and the sacrifices and the behaviors that are acceptable or not acceptable. And then spirituality is our relationship with the divine, the sacred, our personal relationship. So Sri-Chin, we like to use the analogy of religion is like your home. So you may live in the Christian house and someone else lives in the Buddhist house and someone else lives in the Muslim house. But when you are communing with the divine, you all have left your houses and you're going to the same school, the same place.
School, the inner school.
And I think that's a beautiful thing, because you on some level know and understand that all the religions is simply different ways of going to that same place, that same goal or that same school, and communing with that same divinity. And so having that sort of understanding that you can have a religion and you can still have a spiritual life as part of your religious life. You have your religious life and your spiritual life. They both go together. But you can also have a spiritual life without needing a home. If you are not someone who was grown up in one of those houses, it's not essential now in the world to be able to practice. Your relationship with the divine is transcendent in some way.
For sure.
I mean,
I think, I'm brought up that way. I was not brought up in a religious way. And in many ways, I feel it's more of an advantage, because there is no preconceived notions about the idea of God. So I was an atheist in my teenage years. I totally thought God is just a fairy tale.
Proud atheist.
Very proud atheist. Maybe somewhat inspired by my father ideas, who was a scientist and who was also an atheist. But anyway, I did think that, this was all, you don't have any personal experience. Of course you think it's all make-believe and fairy tale. Until I had my first spiritual experience. And I first really gave it some serious thought and practice and had my first spiritual experience. And then I thought, hey, wait a minute, there is something there. And I was able to discover the divine just, on my own, without any, which is very, I find it very refreshing, So you can develop your own personal relationship, and you can, and there's an intuitive knowledge about the divine, because I think we all have, an eternal relationship with the divine, and it's already there from the moment you're born, and of course way before that. And it's really beautiful to rediscover that relationship and to see that it's. I mean, we've been so traumatized, I think, in the previous centuries with the idea of God being strict, disciplinarian, like a really not such a nice person,
Some
send you
people,
to hell if you wouldn't.
Some people felt he was slightly tyrannical. Which seems so antithetical to what the divine truly is.
Exactly. The divine is all love. All acceptance. So I'm happy that you chose the acceptance of life. Otherwise, we would have made the renunciation of life podcast, which we leave to somebody else.
Exactly. There'll be some great Buddhist soul out there who will be willing to do that for
Not
us.
to disparage the Buddhists. We every single spiritual path and religious path leads to the same goal, as we all know.
There's just different ways up the mountain.
Exactly.
So if we go back to what we're doing here, so we're going to be here in Turkey for, I think, 12 days or so. And so you've been part of these type of trips before, and it's something that Sri-Chin we made is a tradition in his spiritual community.
Yeah.
And I think a big reason for that was he was based in New York City, and New York City in December and January is not the most pleasant place to be.
Gets very cold.
So he was taking this opportunity to travel and to
for
be
a man
with his...
born in India, as Chinmoy was. It's harsh. The winters were harsh. Yeah.
So you've been on many of these trips before, and so take me through the experience of what it's like from coming from your day-to-day life and then coming into this type of environment where you're surrounded by your spiritual brothers and sisters who are practicing a similar sort of tradition to you, and what it's like to suddenly go from your day-to-day reality back home in Holland and to be here with all of these people, and then maybe what you gain over the course of this almost 2 weeks here, how you'll feel, based on previous experiences.
Yeah, of course. No, great question. So anyway, at home, I run a small lunchroom.
Mm-hmm.
I have a
Waffle House.
A Waffle House. I would say the best Waffle House, of course, in Amsterdam.
Even better than the Belgian waffles?
Oh, much better. There's no comparison. Sorry for our Belgian listeners, but we do make really great
So
waffles.
the new thing for people is Dutch waffles.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
Anyway, I have this place called Heart Garden in Amsterdam, and when I come here, there's always a moment of kind of transitioning into a new world, like leaving behind your old world that and your normal day-to-day life.
It's a unique situation.
Totally.
Here.
Yeah. So we come to you come to the airport first of all, and you already see some of your spiritual family at the airport, and you connect there, and then you go to the hotel where we're all staying, and there's always this first evening or first hour. So there's a little bit. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a little bit like, what's happening here? You're transitioning into a new world, and it feels a little bit awkward almost for me.
Yeah.
So there's always a few hours of getting used to the new environment. Like, you're coming from a very kind of busy day-to-day life experience, even though, we do practice meditation at home and we try to live a spiritual life. But when you come here, it's increased, it's really focused.
It's amplified. It's amplified your practices and your connection.
Exactly. And so mostly after the first function, we have an evening function where we do meditation and we maybe watch some inspiring videos together, and there may be some singing. And then, when the first day starts, you start to connect with all these people that you haven't seen for a while. And of course, since I'm on this path now for 25 years, and after 25, it's kind of, I see it as my second family. So all these people from different parts of the world, we know each other for many, many years, and they're like my second extended family. So it's really nice to catch up and to see those people and to connect. And it takes me maybe a day or so to kind of get into the groove. You kind of feel that there's a certain groove that you're like into, and then it's like a flow. I feel it's like you step into this river almost that takes you through the whole experience.
Yeah.
And you're going through the functions. So we would have 2 functions a day. We'd have a morning function and an evening function.
Yeah.
We meet in a big ballroom of the hotel. We have all the chairs set up, and we have a spiritual program.
Yeah.
So we do meditation, we do singing, and then in the evening there's a bit more of that lighthearted amusement that we talked about. There will be plays, there will be videos. And then all of a sudden, and then you're getting involved in different activities. So I'm, like you said, I'm mostly involved in plays. So I will stage some small plays, and I will be in a music group. I'm in a choir. We do practices together, and then all of a sudden you're in this river. It's very dynamic.
Yeah.
So there's the day basically just flows by, and it's, I really like that idea that you're in the flow of things. It's dynamic, but it's not stressful.
Yeah.
So there's a really deep peace that's underneath all of that, because it's fed by your spiritual life.
Yeah.
So the main focus is the meditation.
So it has a fundamental basis in the world of peace and stillness.
Yes.
And your practice in the morning and your practice at the functions.
Yeah. And for me, that's also the function of that base of stillness is also as a really good grounding stone or foundation stone for this very active and dynamic life.
Yeah.
And I think that we need both things in life to be really fulfilled. You need the peace and stillness, but you also need the dynamic action. I mean, the action of doing things and manifesting something in the world.
Yeah, I think I'll come back and touch on that, but I just for listeners, because for many people, performing in front of a crowd or an audience is one of the, I think it's I think people fear that second only to death.
I think more than that.
Yeah, more than death.
Yeah, there's a famous joke that's like on a funeral, many people would prefer to be in the coffin than to be the guy giving the eulogy.
Yeah, exactly. So for someone like yourself who's doing these performances, how obviously you're coming from a different perspective as doing it as part of your spiritual life and your spiritual service, but do you experience nervousness, or how do you deal with the being in front of the audience and a group of people? And
yeah, definitely that's also been a journey. So in the beginning, so I've been doing this for a long time now, more than 20 years, and in the beginning I would get very nervous. So also for my first time I was talking, giving a meditation class, for instance, in front of people, I would get very, very nervous.
Yeah.
But I do have maybe the advantage of having had a professional education in acting. So
so you were one step ahead here.
I was in the acting school in Amsterdam for a number of years, and then I always loved the acting, and then acting is nothing other than performing in front of a crowd, right? So and then, but even though I was nervous, I would always kind of force myself to go up on stage and to try to not surrender to those nerves.
Yeah.
So I think you on stage, there's two ways you can go. You can go inside yourself and kind of surrender to the nerves, and that becomes kind of an awkward, almost painful experience, because the audience doesn't like also to see somebody who is visibly nervous. It's a little bit painful when you see
slightly
that.
Cringe.
It's a bit cringe. And or you can embrace the experience and say, I love, like we talked about, I love being here. I love giving a presentation. I love talking about these things. I love acting. And the more I've done that, the more easier it became.
Yeah.
So now it's no more really that I'm wrecked with nerves.
Yeah.
I get always a little bit of a raised heart rate before going on stage. That's always but I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
I think that just makes you focused. I think you need that a little bit. If you were totally, zen and like totally
a stone Buddha, as we say.
Yes. That's
don't want to become a rock.
We do not want to become a rock. So a bit of that tension is good. But then once I'm on stage and I'm doing the things, that to touch upon it in a more spiritual way, I very much sometimes feel like I'm an instrument when I'm on stage. So I feel that someone or something is acting through me, and I can surrender to that experience. It's this idea of the flow. So I feel the flow is coming, and whatever words I have to use, if it's a spontaneous talk, the words, they just kind of form, and it just happens naturally, and I don't have to. Actually, the less I use my mind in those times, the better it becomes.
Yeah.
And so I think you have the same experience.
The more you let go, the more you are open to the potentiality and possibilities coming through you.
And there's actually all these ideas are kind of floating around. And if you're open to them, they can use you as a conduit, and they can make.
So you just have to choose the right ones, though.
Exactly. And I think if you're open enough, they will come. You have to have an inviting attitude, and they will come.
And so for you, very often you're doing these performances, and I'm not so much of a performer in this sense. But do you? For me, I see some value as an audience member and sharing the experience with you. But from what you're saying, it seems like there's also some tremendous spiritual growth and potential to learn some lessons from being up there on the stage. It seems like that's also another aspect of it. That there's a great opportunity for people to challenge themselves and grow.
There's a tremendous opportunity, I think, also to conquer insecurity.
Yeah.
Because that's the first thing that happens to you. You become insecure, you become self-conscious when you're on stage. That's what happens. And that's how I think why people are so afraid of public speaking.
Yeah.
Is because you become self-conscious. And then all of a sudden you have, 100 pair of eyes staring at you.
Yeah.
And once you go into that hole, you're just digging a hole for yourself, and it becomes worse and worse.
Yeah.
But then the only remedy for that is that you just have to start speaking, and just accept the nerves. Don't fight them. Just be have that that kind of shaking voice in the beginning a little bit. Have those shaking hands, whatever. That's all fine. But then you notice that when you accept the challenge, I love that. That's kind of ties into the acceptance of life. When you accept the challenge, you transform it.
Yeah.
So when you say, okay, I'm out here, I'm going to speak. And I accept the challenge, and then before you know it, a few minutes into your talk, it may not happen in the first talk. Maybe the nerves will stay longer, but the more often you do it, the sooner you will get to that experience of, hey, it's actually not that bad. I'm just speaking. And there's tricks that you can do. Yeah, you can imagine that you're not speaking to 100 people in the crowd, but you can visualize
Just one.
Just one person. You say, okay, I'm just going to speak to one person who happens to be my best friend.
Yeah, many of us could talk to one person, couldn't they?
Exactly. Like we're doing,
And I really liked it how you were talking about the tension and the way you were talking about the experience you have as an actor or a performer. It was actually reminding me of an idea that I've been thinking about, the idea that we experience life in waves. And so the idea with the wave is, as the wave is going up, it's expanding. So it's becoming larger. So there's a sense of expansion. And then as the wave comes down into the trough, there's a compression. So expansion and then a contraction.
Yeah.
And so it was sounding like as you get closer to the performance, there's this contraction, like you start to feel tight and tense.
Yeah.
But then what you're trying to remember is at some point the wave is going to reach the bottom of the trough, and then it's going to start expanding again.
Yeah.
And so having faith that when you go out there, you might feel really contracted, like really tense, but just breathing into it and feel as though, and trust that at some point your energy and your consciousness and yourself is going to start to expand as the wave rises up again.
That's a beautiful analogy. And I think you have that also when you race, right? I mean, we both raced.
Yeah.
I used to race. You're still racing.
Yeah, as a runner. Yeah.
We're both runners. And I remember before races, if I had to perform, like it could be a 10K race or a marathon or a half marathon. We're both long distance runners. There's also this tremendous sense of nerves. If you've trained for it and you're in good shape, but there's always just the minute before the start. You're milling around with all these hundreds of people at the start line, and you're like, oh my God, it's going to start soon. Yeah. And there's these nerves. But then when the gun goes, the wave crashes, and then
I think that wave analogy, I've found more and more value in it in my life. As we were heading into the Christmas time, I, as you said, have a music store, and I could feel that happening. I'd feel that business would be going up and up and up, and then it would be dropping down and down and down. And it's when you're on that downward slope, heading down towards the bottom of the wave before it starts heading up again, it's really easy to feel as though, oh my God, it's never going to stop. I'm just going to keep going down. Yeah. And it's like before you're about to perform, you're like, oh my God, I'm so tense and nervous. I'm just going to keep going until I just contract into a ball of stress.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing, because I think as you're getting close to the bottom, there has to be this acceptance and this letting go, and then that allows you to start expanding again.
Yeah.
And if you go back and look at the world and even the universe we live in, this universe seems to be constantly expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting. And so in the early universe, obviously we talk about the Big Bang, and there's this great expansion. Mm-hmm. But before that, there must have been a great contraction to bring it all into that point. Yeah. And I'm not sure if you know, but in the early universe, there was this great expansion, but then there was this contraction into all of the first generation of stars in the universe. So all of this matter expanded, and then it contracted again into these stars. And these first generation of stars are the things that built the materials and the matter of which our universe now is made. So they were all forged inside these stars. So there was this expansion in the beginning, then a contraction again. And then these early stars all expanded again.
How did that happen? Was that a second Big Bang? Or?
It was like supernovas. So these early suns turned supernova, and so all of the material and the matter that we have, like on the periodic table, a lot of this was forged in the heart of these early suns, and so we couldn't have organic life on Earth without that contraction.
Yeah.
And then you see it in all sorts of ways in your life. And I just thought it was really interesting that even for you talking about your acting, that there was a sense of contraction and then expansion.
Yeah.
And so it's just another little way of looking at the patterns and the deeper reality that's going on at any one time.
Yeah, that's very apt. It's very apt. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about what we want to do with this podcast, right? Because we're already an hour in.
Yeah.
And what do we want to talk about?
Well, basically for me, the main thing I would love to do is to share some insights into the spiritual mindset and how that relates to life in this particular time we're living in. Mm-hmm. And so if you were reading the writings of a Franciscan monk from the 1500s, perhaps they don't have a perfect correlation to the experiences you're having at this particular time, because every time has its own zeitgeist, it has its own essence, and there's certain problems and opportunities. And because life is changing so quickly at this time, it's I think it's really useful to have some insight into how consciousness and having a spiritual practice and trying to see the things through a lens of trying to see a bigger picture than just the minutiae of your daily life. Because at the moment, things are changing and happening so quickly that we've lost some of the stability that people maybe had felt in their lives 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, and also with the disappearance of the major religions, like most people nowadays are not brought up in a religion, although many people still are. But there's a big awakening also for new spiritual forms, new ways to live your life in a meaningful way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I see so many people out there suffering in the world, and perhaps unnecessarily. If they had, if people had perhaps some better skills or some better insights into their own nature and the nature of life, perhaps that could help them navigate some of the problems they're facing. And I think you and I can have some beautifully open discussions, and just we're always discussing things from our own limited perspective. And I think that's the wonderful thing about conversations and people coming together and talking is you're seeing things from a unique perspective, and you're seeing the universe from a place that no one else is seeing it. So you could be seeing something.
And here you is anyone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Every single person is standing in a particular unique point. It's like this idea that we are all an aperture through which the universe is experiencing itself. And so for me, having conversations and being able to talk with people openly and freely is really, really useful, because I will learn so much from you sharing yourself and openly in these conversations, and hopefully you'll learn something from me, because we're all trying to understand and map this amazingly cosmic and crazy and chaotic reality that we're experiencing.
Can we just not do that by ourselves? Can we just go just me doing the journey all by myself?
I mean, this is going to be infinitely harder, I would say, because you have only so much time, energy, and wisdom. And so if you think you can figure out the way through the game of life all by yourself, I mean, I say good luck to you. But I think it's very much like a man out on a rowboat trying to, row across the Atlantic. It's like, it's incredibly difficult and challenging. Whereas if you can find some people who are perhaps like-minded or inquiring or interested.
And they have a ship.
Yeah.
For instance, or an ocean liner.
Yeah, like to be able to join in with some other people that are taking a similar journey. So finding some people that have a similar set of values, perhaps, or seem to have a similar set of interests. And obviously, when we talk about things, we're not experts on anything. We're other human beings here having our own unique experience.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I love about this podcast idea, that we talk about our own experience. We talk about how we have experienced spirituality and the spiritual life. And perhaps that resonates with people.
And I think spiritual ideas and concepts are only useful if you can use them as a tool. So I mean, ideas in general, if you can't use them as a tool, if there's no practical application, it's almost like, what am I supposed to do with this? It's like some hypothetical idea. And I think spirituality should be the most intensely practical practice that you do, because if these ideas don't work in the real world, then I don't think they're really true. Like for me, something that's really true is something that works in the most possible number of different circumstances. So if I say the acceptance of life is something that for me is fundamentally true, it's because that if I bring that into play in 1,000 or 1,000,000 different settings, I know that that's a strategy that is going to work really well. And so for me, that means it's in some way transcendently true and real. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a way through this game of life.
A nice map to very practically navigate the game of life.
And so I think having these conversations has some real value. And I mean, personally for me and you, I think it has some value.
So. Absolutely. I always enjoy talking with you about these things. But we're not only going to talk about acceptance, to clarify. There's many, many different topics in the spiritual realm that we talk about. I think we will talk a lot about different spiritual concepts and qualities. Things like humility, gratitude, a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
All these things we'll discuss and we'll touch on.
Yeah. And we'll try and make them, I think, accessible in a practical fashion. And that for me is where this would have some value. If someone can take some of the things we've been discussing away and think, well, I could actually use that in my life. I could actually use that as a practice to make my life somehow more natural and spontaneous, or more better integrate myself into the world.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. And now, you're also a runner, and how does your running play into your spirituality, like into your spiritual life? What is the idea of sports, and in particular maybe running, and in your case ultra running, and what kind of benefits do you gain from that in your practice?
Yeah, because that's another thing that I'd done a lot of sports when I was a younger man. So in New Zealand, rugby is our national game. So I played rugby, I did athletics, so I was doing sprinting and middle distance races. And so that was when I was 13, 14, 15. That was a huge part of my life.
In your high school?
Yeah, and I was very passionate about that. And I was quite competitive, and I was competing at a high level. And then at some point, I started to become more and more interested in those deeper realities, in the spiritual aspect of life. And we can talk about that, those early spiritual experiences on some other episode. But that led me in a different direction for many years. And as I said, I was much more interested in escaping from the world or renouncing the world than I was, taking part in a
What
marathon.
got you disenchanted with the world?
Well, I had some, really what started it was my first big disappointment as an athlete. So I had spent a really long time training for an event, and I made a tactical error at that championships, and I didn't even qualify for the final of the event that I had trained for. So as a young man, spending all this time and energy training towards that goal, and then seeing how easily all of that hard work was lost. And for me at that point, the big problem was that my goals were all external. It was to win a medal, and that was basically it. It was all, like, the whole value of the enterprise was determined by some exterior measure of success. And so that really discouraged me from sport at that point, because I could see my friends were going off and doing other things and having adventures that I want to be part of, but sports requires so much discipline and time and focus that I wasn't able to partake in some of the things that my friends were doing.
You made sacrifices.
Yeah, exactly. And so I walked away from the sport when I was 15, and I really thought that I would never come back to it. And so it's so funny how my life has actually turned out like 180 degrees in the opposite direction, because sport is such a huge part of my life. But when I first started meditating, that was still my position, that the only true value was coming from this inner spiritual practice, and this meditation was what I was looking for. And I was convinced that had all the answers. And then, as I said, I saw Sri Chinmoy, and I saw him taking part in all sorts of things. He was running, he was playing football, he was doing volleyball, he was lifting weights. And so suddenly I had to completely reconsider my picture of the world, because I got new information. And I saw, okay, he's seeing something in sports that I was not aware of. And you could say that was the concept of self-transcendence. And so we'll talk much more about that in some future episodes. But the idea of that is that the deepest meaning from any activity is our own, the opportunity it gives us to challenge our own limitations and to attempt to go beyond them, to do more, become more, grow into more than we've ever been before. And so when I became involved with the meditation center, that was something that really interested me, because I'd had this love of sport, and I'd seen that I'd walked away from it, but now I was seeing it with a new set of eyes and in a new way. And so when I came back to sport, it was no longer about trying to defeat other people. It was more about, okay, what lessons can I learn from this practice, and what are the experiences that I can have, and how can I challenge my own preconceived ideas or limitations.
But yet you would participate in races. So there's the idea of competition, right?
Yeah.
It seems a little paradoxical.
I mean, I always joke, it's very easy for a bunch of monks to think that they've conquered the ego and pride until you line them up together in a 100-meter race. And then suddenly halfway down that 100-meter straight, suddenly you realize, all of your competitive spirit and your ego and pride is actually still there.
Yeah.
And so it's a great way to bring up all of these parts of our being so we can actually see them, we can deal with them. But it's also a great way for us to start to play around with the edges of our potential.
Well, I think competition also brings out the best in you.
Yes.
It's like a tool that is designed that you do the best you can. And of course, the challenge here is not to let your ego run amok and to
Yeah.
defeat others by all costs, but it's
Yeah.
just to use that environment, the
Yeah.
energy of the others around you, their
Yeah.
capacities to do the best you can.
Yeah.
And so you can never do the best you can if it's not, I've experienced, if it's not in a race. Like
Yeah.
I've always run my fastest times when I was racing
Yeah.
and not in training. It's
Yeah.
because you have that sense of, okay, this is the, there's a special moment,
Yeah.
and there's a special time, and now it's time to really shine and unlock all my potentialities.
Yeah, and I think seeing that your real really what you're competing against is, like, as a runner, is the distance. So you're competing against the distance of 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers or a marathon or 100-kilometer race, and that's your real that's your real competition, is against the distance. And your competitors, what we call competitors, are actually, like, I like to see them as my teammates. I like to see them, okay, we're all here together and we're all trying to conquer this distance in the shortest time possible. So it's like, if we're here and we can work together, we're actually going to do much better as a whole, rather than if any one of us by ourselves was trying to conquer that distance. And so, especially for me, I do a lot of long races, like up to 100-mile races, and on the trails.
160K people.
Yeah.
For those.
And these types of races, I never feel like that the people I'm running with my competition. I'm so grateful to have them there with me, and I feel a real comradeship and real oneness with them. And I know that they're helping lift me up or push me to be better than I would be by myself.
You had an experience recently where in one of your races, right, where you had that feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that quite often, and it's probably one of the things I like most about, especially the sport of ultra running, is that because the races are so difficult and challenging, you really respect anyone who's willing to line up and to take on the challenge of those distances. And so it has less of an attitude of ego, and more people. I think the courses humble you. And cause everyone to become a little bit more humble than they would be otherwise.
Yeah.
And in a shorter distance, you can run with a little bit more ego and pride. And whereas in the longer distances, you have to be a little bit humble, and you have to see the people around you as comrades in this great journey. And that's,
I think that starts maybe from the marathon experience. Like the marathon is really, you can't really cheat the marathon. You can't run it with pride and ego.
No, it's like if you have a pack of people to run with, it makes it infinitely easier.
Yeah.
And so what I see, what I've learned from the experience and the practice of running, is that running for me is a great practice, is a spiritual practice. So the skills that I've learned through running, and the way it's deepened my consciousness, and the way I've expanded myself through that, is very much like through my practice of meditation. So I've learned to be more disciplined. I've learned to be more self-giving. I've learned to be more.
How have you learned to be more self-giving through running?
Well, through running, because running is something that long distance running in particular requires so much time. You have to put a lot of time in to get good at that. And so you have to really be willing to make a lot of sacrifices. You have to sacrifice, being at home watching television, or you have to sacrifice your time in bed in the morning to get up and to go out and to do the training. And then you really start to value other people who do that as well. So my teammates or my friends or athletes that I coach, all of these people, I really value them, and I want to give myself and my time to them to help support them, because I know their efforts also help support me. And so, I've got a group of guys that I'll train with 2 or 3 days a week, and those people, I'm really, there's an unbelievable sense of closeness, and this close-knit feeling of doing something really difficult together. But we all know we're much better off from each other person's efforts.
It's like your running tribe.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like me turning up and giving the best of myself and being as encouraging and loving and supportive of them as possible is going to lift them up. And because I know the next day, or later on in that season, there'll come a day where they'll turn up, and their self-giving and their enthusiasm and motivation will help lift me as well. So it becomes it creates a wonderful community.
Mhm. And talk a little bit about your last race, because you told the story, but it's so inspiring when you did your, was it a 100K trail
Yeah,
race?
so in New Zealand it's summertime at the moment, so we
Yeah.
have most of our long distance trail events are on in sort of December, January, February, March. So that's kind of the peak season, and so there was a new event called the Spectacle in New Zealand, which was a 100 kilometer trail race in Nelson, which is at the top of the South Island where I live, and I knew it was going to be a tough course going into it, but no one had ever run the course before, so it was unclear exactly how long it was going to take. And so I had some ideas that it might take around 10 hours, maybe 11 hours.
For 100K.
100 kilometers. Yeah. And the race started early in the morning. It started at 4 a.m. in the morning, so you run in the dark for the first several hours. And the day started off, and I was running along, and right from the start, I opened a little bit of a gap on the other runners, and was just running my own pace and trying to stay as relaxed as possible.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting when you run a long distance race, because you can never really be pushing hard as you would in a short distance race, because obviously the distance is too long. And so I was telling myself before the race, it's just an 83K warm-up, and then it's a 17-kilometer race.
And why the 83K?
So the reason for that was we had finished all of the long mountainous section at the 83-kilometer mark, and there was an aid station, and I had a friend of mine who was going to meet me there and run with me to the finish, which is something you can do in long races. They're called a pacer.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to stay as relaxed as possible, because I find if I can stay as relaxed and calm and efficient as possible across the course, that will actually help me a lot more than if I'm stressed and anxious and really fighting against the course. So I'm trying to move as efficiently as I can at all times. And I'm trying to maintain like a really good state of consciousness. I'm trying to be as positive as I can, deal with problems as soon as they arise, and be supportive to other people that I come across, stay in a really good space so I can have high quality and positive interactions with the aid stations and all of the people helping out there, because they're giving up their time. So, I'm very grateful to these people for them giving up their Saturday, from 4 a.m. to stand on some lonely windswept corner of a mountain to give me a glass of water. I mean, it's a remarkable thing. And the race went really well. And it was really interesting because there was a section of the race that became very, very tough just to move forward, because it was very steep, very rocky, very rooty. I was saying there's more rocks and roots than there was dirt to put your feet. So you had to really pay attention to every single step. And it's really interesting because if at any one moment I thought about how far I had to go, it would have seemed incredibly daunting. But yet if I stayed completely in the present moment, all I needed to focus on was the next couple of steps. And so it was a constant game of keeping myself present in the moment.
Yeah.
And that allowed...
almost like a concentration exercise.
Exactly.
Meditation exercise.
So keep bringing myself into the moment and keep focusing on the task at hand. And so this is actually an experience of acceptance, because you have to accept the nature of the experience you're having. If I was resisting it and wishing somehow the trail was better quality, or someone had been through and tidied it up a little bit, I would just be causing some suffering for myself. So instead, I was really accepting of the course and trying to flow over it as naturally as possible. And it meant that by the time as I got towards the finish, and when I did finish, when I look back on the day, it seemed so remarkable, because I ended up running 13 and a half hours. But the quality and the quantity of experiences, like running several hours in the dark, and then there's a beautiful sunrise, and you're running through the whole morning, and then you're running through the hot afternoon, and it's getting hotter and hotter. And it's you think back to all of these moments, and it seems remarkable that was one day. That all of those things could have happened on one day. So,
and you ended up winning the race.
I did. And I think that's always nice for people to see that. I mean, for me, I'm not so attached to the results of these events. For me, what I'm looking for is the experience. And for me, very much what I'm looking for is the experience of getting to some limit of myself. It's like I'm trying to explore where my edges are as a being, as a consciousness. And so I'm trying to push out into these areas of the unknown, which is often the information you're looking for is in the places you don't want to look for it. That's why you haven't found it.
Sounds like a Zen koan.
So perhaps all of the information you're looking for is at mile or kilometer 80 of a 100-kilometer trail race on a hot day far off in the mountains.
Was it there?
Because this is the sort of place places that you don't normally go to look for
No.
things. And so when you find yourself there, you realize, oh yeah, there are useful things to be found here.
Yeah.
And it's when you get to those points where you're not sure if you can keep going forward. There's some part of your mind.
So you're in unknown territory. You're
Exactly.
like, you're in, but just physically, just from a place of fatigue. You're totally tired. You don't know if
Exactly.
you're going to make it.
Exactly.
It's like you've never been to that kind of state.
Yeah,
before.
you want to put yourself in that state, and then it's always remarkable the strength and resilience you find inside yourself to keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's always the thing that amazes me, that no matter how far I go, I never feel like I've got quite to the end of myself.
Yeah.
It feels like I could always go a little bit more.
Yes.
And that's always really inspiring, because it starts to show me that there is something far more interesting going on within me in my depths.
It reminds me of an aphorism of Sri Chinmoy where he says, we are all truly unlimited if we only dare to try and have faith. It's like one of my favorite aphorisms. And I think that's it, right? We are truly unlimited.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we can do everything.
We perhaps cannot fly.
We cannot, perhaps not.
At
Not
this
yet.
point.
But anyway, we can run a 100K race.
Yeah.
And if we only dare to try and have faith.
And it's a great lesson.
Not untrained, by the way.
No.
You trained for those things.
Exactly. I'm very well trained for these types of activities. I've been doing this for many years. But as well, it's the spaces that you find that your mind goes to, because you start to see the different voices that you have that exist within you. So you have the voice of your body saying, it's tired and it's fatigued and would like to stop. And then you have the mind that's perhaps feeling unwilling and resistant. And then you realize that those voices exist, but they're not the only parts of yourself. And you start to realize that if you can identify with the higher parts of yourself, with your heart or with your soul or whatever terms you like to use, you start to realize that you still have so much more capacity to give more and give more of yourself. And that's really the thing that's most meaningful to me. When I get to a point where some parts of my being are sort of asking me to stop and give up and say, you've done enough. Yeah. There's no need to carry on. You can stop now. And when I feel that inspiration with me, like, no, like there's something more. I want to give myself more fully to this moment.
And I think that is maybe only ultra marathons or marathons where you have that experience, because they really tire you out. So they deplete all the physical parts of your nature, your body, your mind, your vital energies. They're like totally exhausted. And then still there is a source deep within you that is supplying you with new energy.
And very, very often I've had almost ecstatic experiences, at late points in these events where the physical body's so tired, the mind's so tired, but there's some part of me that's getting so much joy from what I'm doing.
Is that the runner's high?
You could talk about the runner's high, but for me, it almost feels like my soul itself. So my name Vajin means swift, strong, spirited, and heroic. And so there's some part of me that loves these heroic adventures in the mountains. And it's like when we're talking a little bit earlier about each of us coming here to learn particular lessons. And it seems like part of my character wants to live out these heroic adventures. And so when I find myself in those situations, I really love it. Yeah. I love it so much. And those moments where there is nothing else for me to do and nowhere else I need to be apart from right there, giving myself fully to running up a mountain, and giving myself fully to that moment is so richly rewarding. And it's almost in a way that is indescribable. I couldn't put a price on some of the experiences that I'll have at those late points of these events. And so
there's a great simplicity about that too.
Yeah, it's like my life has stripped away anything that's superfluous. And all that exists is my consciousness and my willingness to keep going and to keep giving myself. And I feel so engaged. And that's something that I think's really underestimated in this world, because most of us, if I ask, when was the last time you were fully engaged in any one particular moment? Like when you were giving fully your 100% effort in that particular moment. And for most people, it's not very often. Like we can often go through our jobs, perhaps giving 30, 40, 50, 60% effort. And it's very rarely that we're called upon to give ourselves fully to anything. And so I think that's such a rare experience in this day and age that I feel so lucky that I've found a way to have those experiences, because for me, they are so richly rewarding.
Yeah, wonderful. That's a beautiful explanation of why you run. And why running helps you spiritually and gives you meaning to your life. So, yeah.
And for anyone who is a fan of running, and we will talk much deeper and further about that in some future episodes.
And for those who are not fans of running, I think you'll find there is something valuable there too. It doesn't have to be running. It can be any endeavor that, physical endeavor or endeavor that challenges you to go to the limits of your
because
experience.
I think this is one thing I would say, is that if you find a strategy for life that can work, as I said, in the most possible different situations, there's something that's true and real about that is transcendent. So I have tried to find a way that I can approach my running that I could also use if I was a dancer, or if I was a musician, or if I was a writer, or if I was taking part in any of the other myriad activities on earth. I think finding a way of approaching it that would work for all of those different situations and different pathways, that tells you something about that you perhaps have found something that has some real value.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to talk more about that in our future episodes. I think we kind of came to the end of this one.
Thank you.
Thank you too. That was wonderful. And we'll see you next time.
Until then.
Until then.